What's good? What's good? It's the Papineau Podcast, the podcast with me, Vita Morales, the official podcast of the band King Lobster Krew, the podcast in which I give you music recommendations and discussions straight to your eardrums. And we're going to have some fun today. Today we are doing Satan's Pilgrims, Siniestro from 2017. And I'm going to play a bit with the sort of the format of the model rather, I guess, of the podcast. It's nothing drastic. It's just that I know that many of you actually want me to play the full song, and which I can do. The only catch is that if I do that, then it's going to have to be exclusively on Spotify, because that's the only one that allows you to do that right now without needing a sync license. So if you don't have Spotify or you don't listen to this podcast on Spotify, what you can do instead is if you go to the King Lobster Krew YouTube channel, what I will do is that I will still give you the podcast, and not only are you getting the added benefit of having my two camera angles and, you know, seeing my face or whatever, and seeing my ghetto ass pop filter rig because I lost the other one. On top of getting that value, what I'll be doing is leaving you the playlist in the description box so that you can listen alongside this podcast and listen to the songs, like pause the podcast and listen to the songs as needed. Or you can listen to the whole album beforehand and then listen to the podcast. It's really up to you. It's just that that's kind of my workaround for now. Both obviously have their pros and cons, but you know, it depends on what you like. On Spotify, you'll be getting the full song. On YouTube, you won't be getting the full songs, but you're getting the live video feed, or live video feed. It's not live. It's pre-recorded, but you're getting the video feed. And yeah. So let me give you some background information on Satan's Pilgrims. This was ripped straight from their website. So this is Satan's Pilgrims as described by Satan's Pilgrims. So the band formed in 1992 during a series of house parties hosted by the members of the band. And they were playing shows in their hometown of Portland, Oregon by 1993. Twisting their name from the 60s American International Pictures film Satan's Sadists, and now donning their familiar matching outfits complete with vampire capes, they were officially a band. The Pilgrims are one of the most influential surf instrumental bands around. And while much of their sound has a definite Southern Californian influence, what sets them apart is the legacy of their Pacific Northwest rock and roll ancestors and other influences, creating their own subgenre of surf instrumental that many fans call Pilgrim rock. This, along with three distinct guitarists and a relentless rhythm section, gives their live set a dazzling variety of dance party sounds to choose from, while maintaining their patented haunted sound. After years of touring, taking the band all over the US and Europe, Satan's Pilgrims continued to develop the surf instrumental genre. After a hiatus in 2000, they reunited in 2005. The last 15 years has seen the release of 5 LPs and singles on the labels High Tide, Hidden Volume / Double Crown. The rest of the world is catching on to what some have known for over 27 years. That is, if you want surfy, spooky, garage stomping good times, put on Satan's Pilgrims. So this album, Siniestro from 2017, this was recorded in the Mount Hood Masonic Lodge in Portland, Oregon. It's essentially an abandoned brick building, which adds a touch of romanticism when we're dealing with a spooky-themed instrumental surf rock band here. And the personnel were Scott Pilgrim on guitar, Bobby Pilgrim on guitar, Dave Pilgrim on guitar and farfisa, John Pilgrim on bass, and Ted Pilgrim on drums. And in case you didn't know, I think that's taking a page out of the Ramones playbook with their names there. Although there were a few bands that did it before the Ramones. So, excuse me. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to say that I finally come to the point where my review and discussion is covering an album that didn't really do it for me. Siniestro for me felt like a bit rushed, and I've said this in other episodes, but I think that a real reason for the decline in popularity, in surf rock, was due to the monotony of the compositions. So this includes, among other things, the forms of the song, the variety of guitar tones, meandering melodies, etc., etc. And Satan's Pilgrims shared a review of this album on their Instagram page, which goes partly like this. From 1994 to 1999, the Pilgrims did nothing less than master the purest and most impossibly precise surf rock. They then took a long hiatus, and in 2009, took us to more psychedelic dreamscapes of 60s beaches and acid tests, where the dudes on longboards rode waves of electric Kool-Aid. On these 15 perfect tracks, referring to Siniestro, they settle into a more mature blend of single malt guitar instrumentals, somewhere between their past sound and their future. And that review came from Daniel Robertson44 on Instagram. I don't know who he is, but I think that he's a jabroni on the internet just like I am, giving his opinion on the album. And I kind of disagree with him. For my money, they went back to basics here in that it feels like they're emulating an older sound. And I can't personally discern like what kind of spin they're putting on the genre here, unless writing a bunch of minor tunes counts as being spooky and innovative. I don't have firsthand experience in like 60s surf rock, but like to me it sounds like more like 90s surf rock emulating 60s surf rock. So this album could have been part of like the 90s surf rock revival, which I would argue that the band itself is kind of a product of. And in the end, it just kind of seems like they're trying to... So they're writing in a style that is like a revival style of an even older style. And it gets a little meta, but if you follow me, that's kind of what it is. And it sounds stale to me. Like, nothing about that is novel. Like, I don't know. I'm not saying that, you have to be novel at all times. It just, don't be surprised if it sounds... if it's a little flat. When you're playing any sort of legacy genre, which is to say any genre that requires you to research before emulating due to it being removed from your own historical and social context, you kind of have three choices to make a splash. You can stay true to the genre's conventions and play technically better than everyone else. You can innovate it, or you can create a fusion genre that isn't jarring to hear and that is actually quite enjoyable to hear. And I'd think you'd be hard-pressed to find any jazz musician that hasn't built their career on one of those three things. And classical, it's a little different, even though it's also, let's call it a legacy genre, even though there's all kinds of classical music. Classical is a bit different in that, like, to really stand out, you mostly have to be just better than everyone else. Although I will say that certain classical performers are sometimes rewarded in that milieu for... They don't have to maybe be the best technically, but if they can present an interpretation, or if they're interpreting a piece in a way that no one's thought of doing, they can sometimes be rewarded for that. And in this case, where the legacy genre in question is surf rock, Satan's Pilgrims aren't really excelling in any of those three domains with this particular album. That's not to say that their other discography doesn't have some good stuff on it, because it does, but I think that this album kind of falls flat. They're not really excelling in any of those three lanes here. And although their bio boasts that they have a unique take on the genre that some people call pilgrim rock, I don't really hear it here. So let's take a listen to Juggernaut, which is track 2. Okay, so Juggernaut has... I'm going to break out the guitar. I'm not a guitarist, but like Juggernaut has this little melody, pentatonic. Right? Kind of simple, like, and there's nothing bad with simple, but it just kind of sounds like when you first learn what a pentatonic scale or a blues scale is, and I don't know. It just... eh. And then the chord progression, you got 1, 4, wait, yeah, flat 6, back to 1 for the A section. And that repeats, and then you've got a B section consisting of what you have is flat 7, 4, flat 6, 4, and then when it repeats, you have flat 7, 4, flat 6, 5. And then that leads back to the A section, and then the C goes 2, 1, 4, 6, yeah. And then it repeats with the drum break back to A, and then the A kind of repeats a couple times before ending abruptly on 2. So, I'm not a guitarist, like I said, and nor do I have a particularly good ear for chords. So if a jabroni like me can repiquer the chords, as we say in Quebec, then there's probably a good chance that the chord progressions are a little standard. And there's nothing wrong with standard elements per se, especially if you juxtapose standard elements with unexpected ones, but I think you should be aware of how many songs are going to sound tried and true on your album, because if the vibe isn't going to change, then, you know, by track 6, I'm tapping out. You know what I mean? And like I said, the melody just sounded like a little uninspired. Yeah. So let's listen to Taki Souvlaki next, which is track 3. Okay, I'm not going to go through all the chords, but here we can hear that it's in the key of E Phrygian, a form that repeats twice pretty much the same way, except the melody is played an octave higher the second time. Then there's like a little outro, and it all takes 2 minutes and change. From the name that invokes images of Greece, the E Phrygian key, the tremolo picking melody that gets repeated up an octave, I'm getting serious Miserlou vibes. And again, there's nothing wrong with taking standard elements to make a song. It's just that in this case, we have a standard element song followed by a standard element song, and then, you know, one more for good measure. It just seems like it kind of lacks inspiration. And then the next song is Creep Beat, so I'll play that one. So it's in the key of A minor, and straight away, the first few chords we have 1, flat 6, sorry, that should be major, 5, 1. And, you know, like, are you kidding me? Like, we just had that sort of F to E movement in Taki Souvlaki by virtue of it being in E Phrygian and having that flat 2 to 1 movement. So if you're going to have them back to back, like, I don't know. Like, to be completely fair, the form is actually kind of irregular. So you have a 4-bar intro, and then the A, or like the beginning of the melody, it's actually a 3-bar phrase. It's the only time that they play those chords as a 3-bar phrase. Then it's followed by the same thing, but as a 4-bar phrase. And then the melody is played again, and you think that we're going to get the same 4-bar phrase, but instead we actually have an arrival of the 4 chord, like in a blues. So you're thinking, oh, okay, they're just going to play like a 12-bar blues form, but they don't, because if they were going to do that, we should have had the 4 chord like 2 bars earlier, and then instead we get it 2 bars later. So it's kind of like a 1, 2, 3, 4. It's kind of close to like a 16-bar blues, but like it's not really, because we actually get like the turnaround, which is B and C, at a point where we aren't actually expecting it, and then like when it turns around back to A minor, it's it kind of hangs out on A minor a bit before going back to the top. So the whole thing, from discounting the intro, the whole thing is 21 bars, which is like pretty irregular. Like, but the problem is it still sounds like a blues. And for as much as I've been saying like, oh, like they should mix things up a bit on this album. They picked an element to play with which doesn't actually fix the monotony problem in this instance. So I don't want this to get long-winded, so I'll just give you the list of songs which are actually pretty good on this album, or at least worth listening to. The namesake of the album, Siniestro. Fireball, the Fireball is cute. Ghoul School has a spooky-ish melody and a nice vibe, and Uphill Scramble is alright. Better melody than some of the tunes on this album. To be honest with you, this album is mostly good for like the vibe. Like you can dance to it, you can surf to it, and you can have it on while you clean your house or walk to the bus stop. But like, it's hard to recall a tune that kind of like jumps out or that I can walk away remembering. Maybe Manzanita, because it's the last one, and that's, they use like wave and seagull samples. But I think honestly, the first song, Buggin' Out, probably leaves the biggest impression just because it's the first one and it's pretty high energy. But then like they can't really follow up on it after that. So to wrap things up, I'll just say that this gets a 69% on the lobster meter, which is borderline fresh. It's starting to smell a little fishy, but the musicality is pretty much there. Even if the compositions are a little bit boring. Yeah, that's all I really wanted to say about it. But do check out the other discography, so like the other albums. The album that comes to mind that I think is better, Psychsploitation, was pretty good. So maybe I'll do a review on that one at some other point, but like this one, you might want to skip on. I don't know. Anyway, thank you for listening. Check out King Lobster Krew on our socials, and we'll see you next time. Peace.